Behind every record in my collection is a story. This is just one of them. All right, here we go again. Another video, and this one is the Jungle Brothers, Straight Out the Jungle. Now, this record, this started it all. And by that, I mean the native tongues movement. Now, if you're not familiar with the native tongues, let me see if I can run it down, dude. Jungle Brothers, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, I think Chi Ali, Black Sheep, and Moni Love, is it Queen Latifah too? I don't know. Anyway, I think so. Most of those are right, dude. The whole native tongue movement or group is it's supposed to be like this alternative to, wearing gold chains and talking about, the streets. And because hip hop is kind of like the foundation of hip hop. It comes from the streets, and the most obvious thing to talk about in the beginning of hip hop is what's going on in the streets, because that's where everything's happening. And you got it's a lot of young kids rhyming, and you got all those things like jewelry, clothes, car, getting girls, like making big money, I guess. I mean, all that is just easy to rhyme about when you're a teenager or a young adult, especially when you're having fun, because hip hop started out as everyone having fun, partying and stuff, right? So anyway, hip hop is established. You got Run DMC, you got LL Cool J, you got Houdini, the Fat Boys, Beastie Boys, KRS One, I guess Boogie Down Productions, and so on and so forth. So hip hop is established as this kind of like street music, which is like back then everyone's wearing like athletic gear, like sweatsuits and like jerseys, and people got like beanies and baseball caps on, and even some of the high rollers are wearing like rope chains, big jewelry and rings and stuff, 3-finger rings. So anyway, you got all that going on, and that's when hip hop is pretty much getting traction in mainstream. And you mentioned, hey, what's up with hip hop? People already have this image of what hip hop is, so the native tongues, they are like kind of the opposite of that. They're like more like, nature, wearing like, different kind of colorful clothing. Instead of gold, they're wearing like beads, and we're talking about like, eating good food and appreciating, Mother Earth, and just a total grassroots kind of, different take on hip hop, which catches fire, man, because I mean, people were just they were looking for another take on hip hop. And when the Jungle Brothers came out with this whole different take on it, it just opened the minds of everybody and opened the audience of hip hop too, So let's check out the cover, man. Straight Out the Jungle, dude. Check out that cover. One of the greats. I mean, it looks almost like it's airbrushed. Could be just painted. It's obviously a work of art. I mean, this is cool, man. Got that crazy mandrill gorilla in the corner there, dude. I mean, this is super cool, dude. When I saw this, I was like, oh man, this is different, dude. This is exciting. I mean, this is something that, it's not the typical hip hop, right? So, but you know what? My first introduction to the Jungle Brothers was a song called Jimbrowski. Now, at that time, that cut is on this album because this is their first album. I believe this album came out in 1988. Pretty sure about that. So Jimbrowski, I think, what came out in '86. It was an old school joint, man, and they were rapping. They weren't using a sampler. They were using. Well, you know what? I should just save that for. I'm going to talk about that single in another video. It's too significant to just briefly mention it. I got to go in depth on that one, dude. But so the Jungle Brothers, their whole attitude of like, kind of being more grassroots, kind of more conscious, rapping and stuff. They don't really get the credit that they deserve, man, because it's like I said, dude. Jungle Brothers invented it. De La Soul brought it to the masses, and A Tribe Called Quest sealed the deal. So, and by that I mean Tribe Called Quest is probably the most popular group that came from the native tongue posse, dude. And if it wasn't for the Jungle Brothers, dude, there would be no Tribe Called Quest. Tribe Called Quest. I mean, Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest is on this first Jungle Brothers album. There's a song called Black is Black, and Q-Tip, he's got a verse on that. So that just lets you know who was opening the door for that kind of hip hop, and it's the Jungle Brothers, man. Undeniable, dude. So the thing I also liked about Jungle Brothers is that, I mean, these dudes weren't that old, but just because they were kind of a little more, I guess, mature. I mean, their attitude seemed more mature because instead of like talking about how many girls they're getting and what kind of car they're driving and all that stuff, because they were talking about like, eating healthy food and taking spiritual journeys and mentioning a lot of things of, nature. And it just seemed like a more mature approach to expressing yourself in this hip hop game, which at the time was just, a lot of boasting, a lot of battling, a lot of competition, a lot of, street attitude. And this was just a departure from all that, man. It was just like, but also, aside from the subject matter, the music that these guys were making was also, they were opening up people's minds to what is possible in hip hop. And by that, I mean the choice of samples that they were using. It wasn't like, during this time, the samples that were being used were mostly like just funk music, maybe some disco and, classic breaks. Like, if you don't know what classic breaks are, that's all the records they were playing in the 70s for the MCs to get on the mic. Before there were hip hop records, they had these parts of disco records and rock records and soul records and Latin record, any record that had a funky beat on it, whether it be at the beginning or in the middle. The DJs would have two copies and they would keep that break going so the MCs could do their thing, creating hip hop music, right? So the Jungle Brothers, instead of using like the traditional classic breaks and just, the the usual genres of music that, you know, was known in hip hop. They were kind of going outside of that. They were kind of, you know, they were challenging the hip hop audience because they were doing things that wasn't traditional for hip hop, right? But they had such an ear for music, and their lyrics, the content of what they were saying, it kind of fit to these samples they were using, right? And most, or at least a good 50%, half of the album is, there's no sampler. It's just turntables. So the title track, Straight Out the Jungle, they're using a track by I think it's the Headhunters is the name of the band. And the name of the song, I don't know what it is, but at the beginning there's a drum break, and the DJ, is it Sammy B? I think it might be Sammy B. Like I said, I don't do research. I forget some simple things. I think it's Sammy B, dude. Let's just say it's Sammy B. He's got 2 copies of the record, and he's, you know, doing like hip hop DJs did in the 70s. He's catching the break and letting that drum break go for a long time so they can do their rhymes. And but in this case, I've heard interviews, they're using a 4-track, a cassette 4-track. So this whole album is recorded from cassette 4-track, which gives it that kind of lo-fi, gritty recording, you know? And it's like, so they're tracking, you know, these records. They're not sampling them. They're letting them play. And they're bouncing from, you know, track 1 to track 2. Or maybe, you know, the DJ is just keeping that groove going on one track, you know, doing the live DJ thing where he's catching the groove, catching the beat, keeping that break going so they could rhyme over it. But then there's the breakdown, the chorus, that could be tracked. Or, like I said, it isn't out of the question that, you know, dude, is Sammy B? Let me see here, dude. I don't want to be a total idiot, man. Let's see. Oh man, I gotta dig deep. Let's see. All cuts arranged, written, and produced by the JBs. Are they gonna say dude's name? Oh, arranged by Tony D. That's interesting. Red alert. Yeah, dude. Yeah, you gotta excuse me for not knowing for sure what the DJ's name is. I think it's why. I think that's what it is. But just reading that little bit I did right now, Tony D is in the studio, you know, arranging this album. Tony D, I got his album in my collection too. A couple of his albums. He's another significant figure in this old school hip hop world. So anyway, so these dudes they're coming out with this, and so I'm listening to it, and I'm like, man, this is like different. But their skills on the mic, I mean, as MCs, they got an original style, and they're talking about different things, which is kind of like, you know, it's kind of making them rhyme words that haven't been rhymed before on hip hop records, because what they're talking about is different. So it kind of opens up the rhymes to different rhymes, you know. If you keep talking about street stuff, you know, you're limiting what you can talk about, but these guys are talking about all these different things. So now you're hearing all these different words rhyme together that you never heard before, because no one has ever been talking about that stuff before. And so you're like, oh man, this is working. And it's cool because it's so different. It can only be done by the Jungle Brothers. right? So anyway, man. So now you got tracks like Jimbrowski, Straight Out the Jungle, Jungle Brothers on the Run, uh, Black is Black, and there's other tracks on here too, but those are the main ones that were like, oh, I got it like that. How can I forget that? That is the hit. Sly and the Family Stone drum break. Yeah, dude. So these guys, and plus they're super legit as far as like, dude, they have the endorsement of DJ Red Alert, who in the 80s was pretty much, if you got his seal of approval, it was legit, Red Alert was he had one of the radio shows in New York that only legit hip hop was played on. So if you had a song played on his show, it was legit, You get it co-signed by Red Alert, you're in. And Red Alert was definitely not only co-signing Jungle Brothers, he was on the track. I think he's on a couple of tracks where he's actually in the studio on the mic talking, on the record. So, and then, dude, I'm like totally blacking out on the names of these dudes. Oh man, I'm not gonna edit this video because that's corny. So I'm not really getting it right now. But one of the dudes on here, the MCs, his name is Baby Bam, which means Baby Bambaataa. So he's like, like the son of Bambaataa, like musically. And at that time, Bambaataa, head of the Zulu Nation. Again, you got this kind of like African kind of like vibe going on where these guys are like, speaking about, the what do you call it, dude? The black experience as far as like, where you come from, talking about the motherland and just being proud of being African American and digging deep into the heritage. And I think these dudes were like wearing like African beads and dashiki shirts. Yeah, dude, these guys are Afrocentric. That's the word I was looking for. Afrocentric. These dudes were Afrocentric, which is like, digging deep into your culture and having some pride, celebrating, your heritage. And Jungle Brothers, just in the name too, the Jungle Brothers, dude. And, look at the album cover, dude. I mean, these guys are obviously embracing, some parts of their heritage, dude. So it's just, man, it was so refreshing to hear this. I mean, it's one thing to like have like a concept that is cool, but then the music falls short. But these dudes, the concept was dope and the music was even more dope, So even if these dudes weren't Afrocentric, talking about all this nature and this, down to earth kind of way of living, their beats and their rhymes were just good enough. They could have been talking about what everyone was talking about back then, the streets, battling people, whatever, and it would have still been dope. So as artists, Jungle Brothers, 100% legit, dude. So the reason why I wanted to, showcase this record right here, because, this is their first album. This came out before De La Soul and before A Tribe Called Quest. And those two groups have overshadowed the Jungle Brothers. it all starts with the Jungle Brothers, man. Before these dudes, man, there was nothing like it. You know, I mean, I can't think of anything that was like this when it came out. You know, their first single, Jimbrowski. I'm gonna make a video about that because that is significant. But that wasn't really like, you know, jumping into this Jungle Brother kind of Afrocentric vibe, but it was, you can tell their attitude was different, and you know, it's just it was just a little taste of what was to come. And man, when they came out, you know, with this album, it just changed hip hop forever, dude. So that's all dope. So I gotta shine some light on the Jungle Brothers, man. I mean, not this album, but Done by the Forces of Nature, their follow-up album. It's on my top 10, dude. I mean, you know, my top 10, it could change. It does change, you know, but for the most part, it doesn't. And most of the time, Done by the Forces of Nature by the Jungle Brothers is on that list. Sometimes it gets bumped for something else. You know, your mind changes a little bit, but classics are classics. So that means if you liked it 30 years ago, you probably and still like it now, that means it's classic. But hey, man, a top 10 list only has so many positions. Sometimes you gotta take one off to put another one on, even if it's just temporary. But it's a top 10 list isn't static. It moves, it changes sometimes. But Jungle Brothers are often on my top 10. So there you go. All right, Jungle Brothers, straight out the jungle. That's right, that's what it is. I was gonna say something else. Check it out, man. These guys started the native tongue movement. If you like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Black Sheep, Queen Latifah, check these dudes out first, because it all comes from this. All right, man, that's it. Hope you liked the video. If you got something to say about this, questions, whatever, hit me up, man. And if you like the video, like it. What's the other thing? Subscribe. If you're into that, do that. So until next time, peace and vinyl.